Android is on pace to take over the world by 2015. That's next year. How will they take over the world? Well, as it stands, they have 82% market share, and that market share is increasing by between 800,000 to 1.5 million activations per day. Not only does Android dwarf iOS and Mac OS installations, it will soon dwarf all installations, including Windows and everything else. As of this year, there will be about 416 million shipments of NFC-enabled cell phones to hit the market. Of those 416 million, Google's Android represents the vast majority. We're talking roughly 400 million as of now. By the end of the year, assuming Apple blows out their forecasts, Google will still represent roughly 300 million of the 416 million shipments. Put another way, Apple could sell 3 times more than its most wildly optimistic forecast and still only be 1/3 the reach of Android Google wallets. Think about that. And think about whose side you'd rather be on, using math. Caution to all before you go forward. RDF interference is imminent. But Apple got 500 banks to agree to join Apple Pay. They have more influence than everybody. Well, the reality of the situation is 500 banks to agree to join the NFC protocol payment system. That is not particular to Apple, but particular to all vendors who use an NFC chip. Who is the largest vendor of NFC technology through smartphones today? Google, by far, by very, very, very far.
I want to talk about Apple because you have a now you're not short Apple.
I'm not short Apple.
But you have a concern about Apple. What is it?
Well, Apple's a fine company. It's growing very quickly, but Apple is going to face margin compression relatively soon because they have a significant amount of competition from Google's Android. Roughly 70% as of a quarter or two ago of Apple's profits came from a single product. When you have competition, there's this one-on-one margin compression.
Has been raising concerns about Apple. He is back to tell us if he thinks Apple's next big development will be what he calls iBubble or iPop.
When I comment on Apple, Apple has such a strong following. It's in many circles, it's akin to a cult. So it's not as if I think Apple is going to collapse or go out of business or stop being a going concern. But this is the issue. The expectations of Apple are highly unrealistic. So let's assume that Apple doesn't sell as many million iPhone 5s as possible, as predicted, but it still sells a lot. Apple slides 10 to 15%.
All right, Reggie, let's talk tech. Everyone is buying Apple, but you put out a report recently saying that the real value in the space is Google. Tell us about it.
Well, the real unrecognized value is Google. You know, everybody recognizes value in Apple. The fact that they make gobs of money is, you know, indisputable. But the problem is everybody owns Apple. Everybody thinks Apple is going to grow at the same rate it's been growing, which, you know, is highly unlikely. And there's very little unrecognizing with Apple. As a matter of fact, the only thing that is unrecognized is the fact that Apple has a lot of competition and a lot of barriers to replicating its historic growth.
Meantime, the Apple slide continues today. The star of most of last year is now the 5th worst performer in the S&P 500 this year. And it's certainly been a really rough ride for Apple shareholders since the iPhone 5. Why do we say that? Well, look at this timeline, right? Back on August 24th, 2011, Tim Cook was named Apple CEO. On September 4th, 2012, Apple announces the iPhone 5. On November 2nd, 2012, Apple announces the iPad mini. And you can see that the iPhone 5 announcement was nearly the peak for the stock, at least so far. Apple shares down 29% since the iPhone 5 launch and down 21% since the iPad mini came out. So this begs the question, if Apple's slide continues and new products fail to amaze, is Tim Cook cooked as Apple CEO? Let us bring in John Fort, Herb Greenberg, and Reggie Middleton, editor of the Boom Bust blog. And I should note that Reggie put a note out to his clients. I'm not sure the exact price point on Apple, but it was doggone near the top, saying get out of the stock. It was a great call. Why'd you make it, and what do you see happening now?
Okay, well, two reasons for making it. Number one is margin compression thesis. Apple is pretty much done from in terms of a fat margin business model, simply because the competition from Google was designed.
So you think Apple's margins have peaked? They will never be as high as they have been?
Absolutely never. Absolutely never. A lot of people think it's a technology race between Apple and Google, but Google used a business model to attack Apple and not necessarily tech. That business model is what we call a less than free model, which prevents Apple from charging extreme margins. Apple is not done as a company. They can either make better products or drop prices, but if you make better products, the R&D, the expenditure drops margins. If you drop prices, you drop margins.
We put in the principal column 0.02 Bitcoin. At today's prices, that is roughly $12 or so. We put 0% deviation, since we want an exact match. And in the receive exposure text box, we type in the ticker for Apple. And in the pay exposure text box, we type in the ticker for the US dollar. USD equals X, where X is representative of a Forex ticker. Duration for 1 minute. We click the Create New button. And voila, the terms for our smart contract appears. Principal minimum and maximum from the deviation control at 0. We click Accept. We go to the My Orders and Trades tabs, and you can see our brand new smart contract has appeared, at least from our side. Now we switch over to the Windows side. We type 0.02 Bitcoin in the principal amount. We put 0 in the deviation. And we want to take the opposite side of what we just put in the Mac. So we type in USD equals X, which stands for US dollars. So you want to receive US dollars and pay Apple exposure for 1 minute. We hit search to find a contract with those parameters. Voila, we found a match, an exact match even. We highlight that match. And we go down to the button that says match selected, and we have a smart contract summary with the terms. We click place order, which accepts the summary, accepts the contract and its terms. And to the lower left hand corner on the status bar, it says offer accepted. Actually, it said accepting offer, and then it gave you offer accepted. And in the My Orders and Trades tab, we have now a fully executed smart contract with the time ticking down through 1 minute.